At the NADA this year, or
I will be.
Alex will be. I will not be.
okay.
When is it?
The end of January.
Okay, as usual.
And in Houston.
No, Dallas.
Or Dallas, yes, sorry.
I think it better be Dallas. No.
Yeah. I think that's where I got my plane ticket too.
Have they had NADA there before?
Not in
the last 20, 25 years, no.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't recall.
By the way, as I'm looking at this picture up here, seems like all three of us have got photos from at least 10 years ago.
No, mine's longer than that. Much longer.
I know mine's like 12 years.
I think I was still looking at a new flag.
Yeah, I think yours is only like 6, maybe 5 or 6 years.
Mine?
Might not even. Yeah, yours is.
No. I that was taken when I was at Checkered Flag, Jeff. I've been in Vermont for almost 13 years.
I thought you did an update one for Freaking Tech, and then you started using that one.
Nope.
I was in my 30s when this picture was taken, so that tells you. It's probably in my mid-30s, too.
Oh, those were good years. full of sheep balls. Mm-hmm.
Long time ago.
I miss it. That's all
not as long ago for the rest of us here.
Yeah.
Although, Jeff, are you on the other side of 40 now, heading towards 50? You passed.
Oh, yeah. 47.
Oh, okay.
I'm in my 50s already, so.
Yeah. 47.
50 is a distant memory.
I try to forget about it.
I think I'm going to be like 44 or 45 this year. I can't remember. Yeah, that talking about age just shuts everyone up, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, it does.
Now we're all
I'm glad it brought that up.
Reflecting on our lives now soberly.
Well, here we go, fellas.
You just have to quit bringing that topic up, Alex.
I got the sound back, Jeff. So, Cliff, we are stoked to have you for 2022.
Yeah, we're always guaranteed to have Cliff at least once a year.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a great tradition, you coming on here and helping us send the year away. Happy to do this year. See you later.
The last 2 years.
Yeah, really. How was your 2022, Cliff?
It was good. 2022 was a really good year, I think.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, you had a killer Autovate, right? Was this your best one yet?
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, we did. I mean, record attendance, record sponsorship revenue, new location, Scottsdale. Was the Omni there was phenomenal.
I love it out there. It's nice.
Yeah, we had in the lineup. It was awesome. Also, a lot of things. We covered a lot of topics. But when you get the CEOs of CDK and Techion and some of the other companies on stage, it's a good event.
No brawls.
Who and what? Who, no brawls. Who and what stuck out the most?
Well, Jeff, that's a great question. It's almost in a way asking about your children, because I think all the conversations were all, I think, strong. And you know how I do it. I mean, I don't script these. Really, it's I just tell them, be ready to talk about your company, be ready to talk about your part in the industry, or your perspective, and we'll go from there. But you know, we had Michael Dunn, who is a Chinese and EV expert in the auto industry, well known in the OEM and supplier circles, not so much the dealer community. And that was a fascinating conversation. We covered the gamut of geopolitics with China and EVs, and really got down and dirty with some just fascinating aspects. I don't know if you guys have heard Glenn Mercer speak. He gave a presentation. He led off, and he's well known in NADA and probably dealer principles, but so much, on the vendor side, not really well. But Glenn is he's an older gentleman, looks like he's going to be incredibly boring, gets up on stage with a PowerPoint and it wowed everybody. I think it was fun watching it was fun watching the reactions. Oh yeah, he's an incredible dry wit, great perspective, former CIA analyst, former McKinsey analyst, but ruthless with his wit at times. And it was a great way to start off.
What was his topic overall?
Well, just he covered the gamut. I mean, just in terms of, I think, EVs and the future of the industry, some of the manufacturer dealer relationships, but his perspective, and he's tied really closely to NADA, so he has a pro dealer perspective to some respect, but he certainly went to task on analysts and people making predictions and economists saying, hey, we're always wrong. So, and he's right. I mean, my whole shtick the last 3-4 years has been, starting off my presentations with an image of a shattered crystal ball. And I think what Glenn did was put a lot of the conversations into perspective. And obviously, I like him because our perspectives are similar. But like every year, I mean, all the time, we're always talking about some new threat facing dealers or facing the industry, and it's just, it gets tiresome.
Gets old.
It gets old. It's okay. I mean, people are going to be saying the same thing 15 years from now.
Probably. So. Yeah. Was there something specific that maybe he pointed to? Like, what was some of the latest things that people were maybe looking into the crystal ball around? It was, making the prediction that this was going to be the big disruptor to the automotive business that actually ended up not being.
It's, I think there's several historically through the years, but I think you look at, obviously EVs are the big question. I was talking with Alex, I think, before you jumped on. I think, I said, I was telling Alex, the two big questions facing our industry, and I think everything else is noise, but the two big ones facing our industry right now are just EVs and the connected vehicle or software-defined vehicle. A few years ago, we would have said autonomous, and that was the one big threat. Everyone, to me, anyone with a rational understanding of the industry knew that whole autonomous play was no threat at all to our space.
Not yet.
Not yet, and I don't think in our lifetimes. No. Really, I don't. The human, the American psyche, I should say, is, I think, socially, psychologically, we like to own our vehicles. Period.
Well, what did
sharing our vehicles?
Well, what did Kevin threw up something around personal mobility? I don't know if he was referring to that as being one that was a disruptor that no longer is, or one that will potentially be in the future.
No, it will not be. Like Glenn has never. He's somewhat mocked that perspective. That personal that was a threat.
I think
the only way I see something like that happening, and that's if we were somehow, for whatever reason, forced into a position like that. But other than that, I don't see people giving up their personal freedom around owning a vehicle.
No.
Last you were on, Cliff, we were talking about how our cars are just locker rooms with wheels. And we just like to keep all our stuff in there, and I'd have to take it in and out every time we're going.
That's my big argument. A few years ago, you had these so-called analysts uh, talking about the vehicle sitting in a driveway or garage 95% of the time being unused, and I'm laughing.
Yeah.
Going, wait, you're defining usage wrong. Even if it's sitting in my garage, it's holding my golf clubs, it's holding the baby seat, the child care seat, it's holding my trash, whatever. Who wants to take those out every time you get out of a vehicle?
It's representing my freedom.
Exactly.
Yep.
I get to jump in the car at midnight and run to the drugstore that's open if my child has a cold and needs some medication. I'm not waiting for an Uber car to show up.
How does the younger generation that's taking more and more time before getting their license and not viewing, having their own car as that level of freedom that we did with our generations? Do you think that plays into it, or you think that's just sort of a trend? Will that have
Who
any
says
real
that's who
impact?
says that's what they think? They by the time they're 25, the driver license phenomena is over. They've all gotten their driver's licenses. By the time they're 25, they've all caught up. It's just that period of time
Just
in
a
history
delay.
right now where they delay it. It's all. And I think once you start having kids, you start realizing you want your vehicle, right? So,
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, my
once they
son,
get it, Jeff, aren't they just hitting the road just as hard as anyone else?
I would assume so. I
My
mean,
little brother
everyone
was
knows.
that. I've watched some younger cousins and whatnot as well. And
yeah, I've seen both sides of the extreme, even in my own house. I mean, my son, he wanted to get his license, but it wasn't some major priority. And, he got into a position where he had to wait a little bit longer just because of different laws. And we're right there at the beginning summer of COVID. So there was an organic delay around that. But then I look at my daughter and, she's not even at that age yet. And she's sometimes won't shut up about getting a vehicle because she wants to go, she wants to be able to go get a job and, which I'm not complaining about. I think that's great. She wants to get her job, has some of that freedom. And so, I've not two extremes, but closer to of the two extremes in my own house.
Point. I think part of the point is that every so often we have these things, and so-called experts, love to start talking about societal changes or things that are going to impact the dealer world. And we saw it with the advent of the internet. We saw it with autonomous starting and people talking about the dealers going away. And now people are talking about EVs being that dynamic.
Yeah.
I
Where do you see that falling? I mean, with your expertise, where do you see that falling with the EVs? I guess initially some of the manufacturers were trying to see if they could find a way to go direct to the consumer, maybe follow that Tesla route. But then we've seen, I guess, I think I read an article not too long ago where Tesla was talking about actually opening up dealerships, going, to the way we do things. Where do you see that falling maybe within the next 3 to 4 years? Do you think the manufacturers will be successful at going directly to the consumer? And if so, I mean, I don't see it being successful, but if so, how would they go about doing it?
Well, there's two big questions, like I was saying earlier. I think for the automotive retail space and for the auto industry in general, one, the EV question, and two is the connected vehicles. So first, the EV question, and there's a lot of ground to plow with both of these, but I'll try to be succinct and give you the Cliff Notes perspective.
We always like the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, I think we're not going to have an answer on the effectiveness of the EV initiatives from the manufacturers. We're not going to have any real clarification or answer on how successful they will be for another minimum 5 years. if we're fortunate. We're just, we're going to start seeing more and more of these EV models roll out. Whether these launches are successful or not, it will depend both on the ability of the manufacturer, but also money, financing. I think infrastructure, and that infrastructure question goes way beyond just what's available on the grid today, but the battery technology, supply of minerals, mining capacity.
Well,
I mean, listen,
I think that's the big red flag, and not a lot of people are talking about it. And I just listened to a podcast earlier this
yeah,
week on a gentleman that is in the heart of this, and he initially was, I guess he was initially a reporter around human trafficking. And
mhm,
then that sort of led into what's happening at these mines. And he debunked the whole clean cobalt theory. Um, but like thousands and thousands and thousands of people, basically slaves, are being used to get these minerals. And I
yes.
mean, he had photo evidence of this, and it was like
Oh, sure, sure.
it was mind blowing. You're like, how, like,
Well, it's not just the cars; it's our computers, our
oh yeah,
phones.
not
I mean,
just
these are
cars.
all
Yeah,
right.
it's
I mean,
all the batteries. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, Jeff,
But
we've
I
been
think
buying conflict diamonds for years.
Oh yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think people really, I hate to say
right.
it, I don't think people care
I
about
know.
just it's made out
But
to.
I think here, so let's take it
That's
here in the
supply.
States. We have numerous lithium deposits here in the U.S., and the federal government doesn't really have any power to open those mines and make them available for mining. It's the local people, the local municipalities that are the obstacle there. I mean, who wants a lithium mine in their backyard, right? So we have these huge deposits, and 6 or 7 of them that I think that I know of right now that we can't mine at.
Hmm.
So I think there's a lot of questions there. So the question of the EV thing, we're not going to know how successful these initiatives are for the next 5 to 10 years. And listen, Nick, if they are super successful, that does change a lot of things in terms of, I think, service and revenue for dealers. I think there's a lot of questions regarding, and we all know that. I mean, that the amount of service required and how much revenue could be lost from that. I think uh, the other, but again, like I said, we're not going to know for some time. I think Mary Bear will be retired long before we know the answer to this question, right? Uh, Alex, you and I earlier were talking about. You mentioned hydrogen. I um, I don't know. I mean, that still seems like a long way away. And I've seen a comment that someone can't hear me well. I'll lean into my microphone better. I had unplugged my microphone yesterday. Probably should find that. Oh, the hydrogen still. I mean, that's so far away. That won't be in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Did you say
I
that
think
won't
the other
be in our
question.
lifetime?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I've seen some interesting things, but nothing of significance, Alex. Think of how long we've been talking about EVs, right? And how old are we
Well,
right now?
how long have we been talking about hydrogen? I mean, I remember back in '99, Volkswagen was working and actually had a few vehicles running on hydrogen, and 2 or 3 years later, after that, never heard a word from it until here, maybe lately. Cliff, are you being held hostage?
I am not being held hostage, but I did just blink twice for
Blink
Christine.
twice.
Don't send the SWAT team in here. I don't. My camera is messed up. I don't understand what's going on here. My microphone.
That's fine. We can hear you just fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, someone was sitting. Oh,
More about the
no. The other
content,
question.
what you're saying.
The other question about EVs that no one's talking about is what will the Chinese do? And
What
I
will the
think
Chinese do?
Well, there's the vehicles are getting better in quality. They're getting smarter, and it's not out of the question that a BYD or some other. Thank you, Christine. Please. uh, there would be. It's not out of the question that some of these Chinese companies would try to make a big play here in the U.S. Regardless, there's some pretty heavy tariffs in place to block it, but some of these companies have plenty of money and could certainly make a strong play here in the U.S. that have viable vehicles. So again, there's a lot of unknowns over the rest of this decade. I think the other question would be on the whole connected vehicle stage, and I think that's even potentially more of I don't want to say threat, but even more of an impact possibility on the retail space, because the manufacturers, and we talked about this last year and probably the year before, manufacturers in theory will have a much more direct access to the customer than they have today or have had historically, via the connected vehicle, via the phone apps. And what does that do to the dealer relationship? What does that do to vendors who market in data, customer data? I think there's some open questions there. Now, of course, the manufacturers have to execute well, building out these customer data platforms or connected vehicle platforms. Can they do that? I don't know. I mean, do they need another player? I see Drew's comments. The threat on the retail space of dealers aren't allowed to share in the money. And I was writing that 6 years ago, Drew, that the connected vehicle was the potential threat, that NADA and dealers needed to step up and start negotiating and working with the manufacturers on having a piece of that revenue. We've seen Mercedes do that recently. The Mercedes Dealer Council earlier this year negotiated a 5-year deal with Mercedes in which they could participate in the over-the-air service update revenue. That's a 5-year deal. We'll see, but it does give us a playbook to operate from. And I know in the new, I know Ford is thinking about it also. Ford has actually had that as a line item in the new franchise contracts that they're working on. But there's very little. I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done there between Ford and his dealers. But we're going to start seeing more of that conversation that Drew just said. Dealers are going to have to participate in that revenue stream at some level. So there's some business opportunities out there, folks, for people who are smart and have some ability to play ball. I think in terms of creating new customer, maybe new F&I packages that both involve the EV and connected vehicle revenue. I mean, there's a lot of ways that this can go. But again, those are the two biggest questions over the next 10 years.
Well, how about we concentrate on what last year was like, and maybe even the last 2 years. So,
yeah, I'd like to touch on maybe some of the acquisitions. What you've seen over the past 2 years compared to years prior.
First, we'll start with the dealers, the dealer buy sells activity. Obviously, 2021 was a record year, and that was primarily because the public dealer groups and private, but the public dealer groups were flush with cash and had to deploy that cash at some level, and you can only buy back so much stock. So we saw some large deals get done. Miller Automotive Group out of Utah. You saw RFJ get done. You saw GPB get done. So there were some massive deals that public dealer groups were able to spend the money on. Not so much this year, but the activity still has been pretty active. I mean, I think third quarter there were 385 rooftops by the end of the third quarter. That were so, and we had quite an active fourth quarter. People trying to get the deals done across the finish line. We had some big ones. I think Brown in your neck of the woods, Jeff was acquired. That was a big deal. We had the single most expensive deal done. With the Elway Toyota store in California, acquired by the Swicker Group. That was well into the 135 million, I think, or thereabouts. Really? Yeah. So, what are we going to see next year? I think the values have peaked.
So you think blue sky values have?
Yes.
The mark.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I think first quarter. I think fourth quarter. It'd be interesting to see what the fourth quarter numbers look like when we hear the public dealer groups provide their earnings calls. I think the fourth quarter is going to be a rough quarter. Just listen, we saw it with Carvana, we see out CarMax third quarter, CarMax, Car Guru's third quarter. They had a pretty rough third quarter. And I think, the people were starting to see it at the beginning of end of the second quarter and the third quarter. So I think first quarter will be even worse from the number wise. But again, everyone's going to be hammering about it. You'll see all the headlines. I think it's just noise. Hey, it's the market rational. It's just becoming rational again. That's all. Mm-hmm. That's what we're going to see. And
you had two great years as car dealers. Yeah.
But it was artificial. It was an artificial creation. And I'm sorry, but anyone that thinks that the manufacturers are going to maintain and hold the line on discipline with a disciplined approach on production without incentives is crazy. It's not going to happen. At some point we'll be back to where we were pre-2019, pre-2020. Hey, just think about the paycheck fell. Oh, the paycheck was great, but the pain's going to feel real coming back down to earth. I do think, we're talking 150, 160 different EVs being launched in the next few years, next couple of years. Tell me all those are going to be home runs and aren't going to need incentives. Yeah. Okay. We're going to see it. We're going to be back into a highly incentivized market at some point.
I think it's going to happen quick. We've seen such an adjustment just in the past 2 months.
God, we just saw Stellantis drop a pretty big one for some of the Ram trucks.
Yes,
I wasn't expecting
we were
to go that far.
We were selling G's 50, 60, 70 over MSRP, and that took that came to a quick halt just this month.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I gotta wonder though. Someone brought something up around, and we've actually had the discussion over on DealerRefresh for a quick second. Something about has to do with the crypto market. I mean, I don't know. I heard, a lot of rumors that so many people, when I say this, I'm really talking specifically around the super high end vehicles, your G classes, your $150,000+. But so many people had lost so much money in crypto over the past, several months that's really put a stranglehold on the, your high end market. I don't know if that's true or not. I thought it was an interesting thought process.
Short-term blip.
Yeah.
That'll be forgotten. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, Broke just made a comment, just commented that part companies are still backordered, still manufacturers are backordered. That is true. And I think any recovery or any rational approach is going to be done on a manufacturer by manufacturer basis, and it may be done on a month to month or quarter by quarter basis. I think so. You just have to know know what's going on in your manufacturer. But listen, Ford, GM, Toyota, all these have all over various times figured. Sorry, Brock. I was going with the French pronunciation.
That spelling had me going that direction too, Cliff.
The they all at various times over the last year and a half have thought they've had the supply challenge solved, only to be back where they were, production wise, with limited supply. So I think, listen, this next year, 2023 is going to be 2022. I mean, less so because the profit was still there. 2023 is going to be uneven. And I think, you probably even into 2024. Again, but when haven't we operated in uncertain waters? I mean, our industry is phenomenal at adapting and adapting quickly.
Yep.
There may be some short-term pain. There may be some people that get burned. I mean, there was an 09. I mean, we saw Bill Hurd. We saw, some other large groups that got blown out. But it was just, it wasn't a trend. It was just some folks that got a little stupid or over their skis. Here, I mean, I'm not worried about this. I'm not worried about this space. I think we're going to be fine.
Well, there was a second part to the acquisitions. The tech companies or the vendors.
Yes. Yeah.
We've, I think a lot of the SaaS valuations have significantly come down in the past few months, but there's still, from what I hear, quote unquote dry powder out there in these investment firms who are still sitting on gigantic war chests, and they're sort of sitting out for the stormy period right this moment. But how long can they do that before their clients start saying, "Hey, ready to see some return here again"?
Well, surprisingly, in the fourth quarter, we've had some deals get done in the fourth quarter. So, Better Car People, Central BBC just acquired Better Car People. There's been some others. We're going to see a rather sizable acquisition for our space, probably get announced in the next 2 weeks, maybe, or by the end of the month, going into NEDA.
What do you know, Cliff?
Yeah. I'm keeping that one under my hat for right now, but you'll know when you see it. Cliff mentioned that. So there's deals. There have been deals that we backed off on though. There was a large one that was rather large one, notable company that was running a process, and they took it off the market after a few weeks. They weren't getting the valuation that they were hoping for, but they'll come back to the market at some point. We're right now, fourth quarter, first quarter, we're in a tough spot. The banks, it's hard to get. The interest rates are up. The CDK deal, which is the biggest one in history in the automotive tech space, that got done. Brookfield, $8.5 billion or whatever the numbers ended up being, was in that range, $8.5 billion. And I'll tell you, that deal might not have gotten done if it had waited or if it had been pushed back, a few weeks later, just because the banks, already Citigroup, which had provided much of the funding and led the funding on that deal, are having trouble selling that debt. Twitter ran into the same problem, but yeah, it comes down right now. It's the rates. I think we have to, either the rates will come down or the banks have to rationalize. Lenders have to rationalize their books, so to speak, to be in position to start, or maybe rationalize their expectations, I should say, and get everyone used to the new normal right now. But and that may, listen, I'll tell you what, I mean, that has pushed some deals to the side. Some companies, I'll tell you, I mean, to be honest with you, I think JD Power would have launched a process this year, had the markets been in better shape, I think Solera would have tried. Um, I think, it could make for an active second half in 2023, much more active. But to your point, Alex, there is a lot of dry powder, and they do have to deploy that powder. At some point, I think it's just a matter of trying to get a better read on the markets and how, whether this recession is going to be hard or soft or mythical. But again, these things all tend to work.
Yeah, I heard that there was a move toward instead of investing in vision, they were going to invest in companies that are profitable. Might be the change.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. We've long have said that, have complained about some of these valuations, quote unquote, complained or remarked about some of these valuations that make no sense from a historical, traditional financial perspective. Are we coming back down to earth? Yeah, probably, for sure. And does that make a move towards more? Does that move some of that investment capital towards more established, historic, long-term, quote unquote, long companies that are net 8 to 12, 15-year stage, development that maybe don't have the glossy, attractive SaaS multiples, but provide predictable revenue and are just the nuts and provide the nuts and bolts of some of this customer engagement. I think it's, you can create a narrative for that. It will get, hopefully, will investors buy that? I don't know. I mean, it's that Buffett school of investing. You buy for the long term and invest for the long term and not worry about those high quote unquote multiples.
Well, investments and acquisitions as well are insanely complex deals. It's not all about it's not always about the dollars, believe it or not. It's more about the people.
Yeah.
Right?
So, well, maybe more so from a negative sense. I mean, you could, yeah, and certainly you look at our space, all right, and oftentimes the personality of the management or leadership or ownership dictates how some of these processes go and whether these deals get done. No doubt. I look at Reynolds as being an absolute, there's certainly, that's a company to watch. Change in ownership, essentially, change in quote unquote leadership, so to speak. I mean, what happens there? And does that company become more willing to do some other things that they weren't in the past, both from an acquisition or from a sales perspective? We'll see.
Oh, let's hope.
Well, listen, you're seeing a different Reynolds today. I think there's a different Reynolds in the marketplace today. It takes a while to change and steer that ship, but there's a newfound sense of freedom, I think, there in Dayton and Houston that wasn't there before. That will allow them to operate in a certain, in a different manner than what they could have in the past. But again, whoever, if that company decides to sell, who ends up with them? I mean, that's a big question mark. Obviously, Brookfield's not going to want to hold on to CDK long, 3 to 5 years, I would imagine. Tomo Bravo, the JD Power.
Mm-hmm.
It takes, I think Vista Equity with Solera. There's some big plays are going to happen here in the next year, 2 years. There's some big plays that could I think reconfigure the whole tech space, maybe. But some of that depends. Listen, there's some other things going on under the radar. You have Salesforce that launched their automotive retail platform recently. I think the Amazon question.
Salesforce,
yes. Didn't get a lot of press, but I've been waiting for
I didn't hear about that.
Years. Yeah, I've been waiting for this for 6 years. It all has to do with that whole connected vehicle space. I don't. Um, they've got a lot of learning to do. I think the Amazon question. You may hear something soon about Amazon that's going to get everyone in a tizzy and in a tither, and
Again,
see a
Really?
lot of headlines and people throwing opinions around. And I'm telling you, it's just noise.
I was
Don't
going to
fall
say, how
for
many
it.
times
It's
does that
just
happen?
noise. Yeah, it's just noise. I think the real play for Amazon is longer term, and it has to do in the whole data infrastructure,
Yeah.
and cloud space for automotive, and that's, I think, where their real attention is. But I don't think Amazon knows what Amazon is going to do yet. So, but again, anything you see in the near future regarding Amazon possibly selling cars or whatever, just don't lose your focus. Don't get out of sorts about it. It's like I said.
Yeah. Well, again, how many times does that happen? Always,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to say cried wolf, but I could go back through the archives of DealerRefresh, type in, do a search for Amazon, and
absolutely.
every 2 or 3 years was some big announcement. I mean, going all the way back to 15 years ago.
Right. Exactly. So, I saw someone was
Cliff,
talking about wholesale. Anyway.
You've always made the argument that even though we, and I'm speaking collectively, as an industry, typically view the DMS companies as evil, they've been a protection for our industry against things like Amazon and whatnot.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's counterintuitive in some respects. I don't know that. I'm not saying they were doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. I mean, it was, but I think at some level they made it harder for some of the large outside players to enter the space. And I'll say this. We talk, and this is controversial. I've said this for a while, but we talk about wanting that frictionless process. We talk about wanting to create this completely frictionless sales process for buyers. I to a point, yes, but be careful what you wish for, because if we have that world, then that means dealers are either out of the equation or have very little say in the equation. That means manufacturers have taken total control over the process. That means the entrepreneurial nature of our space that is so attractive. I think that so many of us love, from the dealership to vendors, will be gone, will be decimated. I mean, we're not going to see some of these deals. The companies that were able to sell, the dealer.coms, the Cobalts, the E-Leads, the the Darwins. Some of these companies. I mean, we're not going to have that in the future if the manufacturers are completely controlling the process. What we have now is a great space that that provides that entrepreneurial, capitalist, American dream. See us problem, let's solve it. I like that world. And I don't like a world in which the manufacturers have complete control. And I think capitalism is messy. And I think there's and to the victor goes the spoils. To the market determines who wins. And I think I like that world. I was talking with a Uber driver in Scottsdale, Arizona, who had a Audi e-tron, and he was complaining about the process at the dealership, and wanted the ability to buy directly from the manufacturer. So I said, well, you ended up with the car anyway, so you obviously bought it. He goes, oh, I bought it from a different dealer. I said, well, why? He said, well, they weren't charging I went to this other dealer. They weren't charging 20,000 over MSRP. They charged MSRP, and the process was great. I said, well, don't you understand? That's what you want. You want the freedom to choose. I said, if you had to buy it from Audi, you would have no freedom, no choice in the matter.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to take
That's
whatever
right.
you want, whatever they give you. I said, here, at least you could play one dealer off against another. You don't like the price, you don't like the process, you go somewhere else. So do we need to improve? Heck yeah, but come on. I still like some of the messiness and some of the adversarial aspect in the market driven approach to our space. So like I said, be careful what you wish for.
Yep.
That's well said.
Yeah. So, and someone was asking, I don't know, there's so many questions here. Wholesale versus retail. Which
Carvana. There's.
Yeah.
Where's your head and opinion around the whole Carvana debacle?
Spirit Halloween.
Time will tell. Yeah, time will tell. I mean, it's a race against the clock right now. Can they cut enough cost out of the process? Can they sell the real estate, the Odessa real estate, fast enough to right the ship? I don't know. It's an ongoing question. I think if a bankruptcy would happen, it would happen in the second half of the year, at the earliest, probably later second half. But again, it depends too on these wholesale prices are dropping faster than people can keep up right now. So, and as Kevin Fry is saying, Carvana has enough cash to survive 2023. That's the question: is do they? I mean, that's why I'm saying 6 months, probably be late second half. They do have the real estate from the Odessa deal they can sell. It does seem inevitable at some point. Now, there's some chatter though that there could be an acquisition. Someone could pick them up, and there's probably conversations with some of the public dealer groups right now as to whether a Carvana acquisition is feasible or makes sense.
They haven't slacked back on the advertising. Matter of fact, I've heard more advertising out of Carvana in the past month than what I have in the past year or so.
Right. So we've got some. We certainly have. I think there's. Again, some of it is going to be dependent on the market and where the market goes, in terms of the wholesale versus retail on the used car side. We're getting. CarMax has certainly been hit hard recently. People were talking about them being the canary in the coal mine. That's what I'm saying. I think first quarter could be a really rough quarter. It'll be fascinating to see what the numbers look like for the public dealer groups, what they're saying in the fourth quarter earnings that we won't see till January, February. So we'll see. I think we'll have a little bit more clarification come January, February on some of this stuff. And a fascinating piece that no one's talked about, is Car Gurus. And, in September, end of September, they filed, they bought Car Offer, 51% of Car Offer 2 years ago. And they had the opportunity to buy another 25% come September, by September, up to 25%. And then there's another tranche they can pick up later. And they buried it in a filing in an SEC filing in September that they had passed on another round of investment or acquisition of Car Offer. And then they talked about it in the third quarter earnings call and in their filing, and it was pretty damning. The falling wholesale prices exposed a lot of operational efficiencies within Car Offer. So everything was great until it wasn't, for Car Offer. So I think there's Carvana is not the only one dealing with some of this. So I think there's there's some pain that's going to be felt over the next several months, no doubt.
Oh, yeah.
But again, um, the smart people are going to figure it out, and it's nothing that we haven't gone through before. Another thing you're probably seeing. I don't know if you're paying attention to headlines. You're seeing a lot of talk about repossessions and repossession rates climbing. I think a couple weeks ago there was a huge.
Yeah.
I mean, there were 1,000 articles with the same headline based off of something the CFPB had published. I'm sorry. And there's a lot of talk on Twitter, and I'm like, do the math, folks, please. Do the math. Okay, there's 44,000 new and independent used car dealers in this country. Repos are at a historic lows. Historic lows. We're talking, and we may not even hit in 2022. We may not even hit 1 million repossessions, give or take a couple 100,000. Historically, you're looking at 2 million or more repossessions a year. There's more than enough capacity to handle any rise in repos.
Why? Where's this narrative? Where's this narrative coming from, and what's the benefit of it?
Bad journalism.
Really bad journalism. And people jumping on and seeing a headline and commenting, and what Brock just said. I mean, lenders are they're waving. This stuff has been. I've been in this industry for 32 years. Okay, this is nothing new. Nothing new. 2 years ago, remember when Hertz was going bankrupt and everyone was, they're 500,000 units. What impact is that going to have on the market?
I remember.
Liquidate. No impact whatsoever. Do the math. You're talking 8 vehicles per dealer, period. And then the Carvana. If they go bankrupt, what impact is that going to have on the market? 54,000 vehicles in their on their lots right now. 54,000. Do the math. Nothing. It wouldn't even be a blip. It's a car per 1.3 cars per dealer. There's more than enough capacity. We could go to 3 million repossessions and still not feel it.
You do a Google search. Do a Google search for car repossessions 2023, and I mean it's loaded up.
The industry's going to crash. It's horrible. What's it going to? I don't know. I'm sorry. I get on a little bit of a hobby with some of this stuff. That just take a step back and
I mean, you can't sit on Twitter and take a tweet and turn that into a whole story. People
that's what journalists do now.
That's
people do.
Right.
That's research today.
The CFPB came back, did a study saying that repossessions are up. Well, there's nothing anywhere that I can find that indicates what the comparison is to. Number one, how bad it is. And they're making it out like the lenders and the dealers are the bad guys because of we're selling cars that people can't afford. The rates are going up. Well, I'm sorry. It's such a non-issue, and here I am spending 10 minutes on it. But I feel
it needs to be said, Cliff. I mean, this is and not just on the repo side, but just the fact that I think to your point earlier, and your whole point for this entire session today goes right back to how you fired it up. Like the only 2 questions that have any meaning on the future of the automotive space are EVs and connected vehicles.
Right.
Everything else is noise.
Yeah. It's stuff that we've all dealt with in the past, and we'll figure out. There's plenty of capacity in this country, but again, I do think that we are in a space of we are in an era of uncertainty, an uncertainty that we've never been in before, and it has to do with those 2 questions. There's no doubt. And good arguments can be made on both sides on the whole EV question. I don't know that anyone knows for sure. My guess is we're going to end up somewhere in the middle, where EVs are going to be part of the landscape. The ICE vehicles aren't going to go away, and we may end up with some hydrogen stuff over time. But I don't see a world in which ICE vehicles completely go away.
Oh, I think when a lot of this EV stuff was being solidified, the factories were being built and all that kind of stuff, the supply chain was in much better shape. And things have changed significantly. So
yeah, certainly that. I think at one level, the price of EVs have to come down, and we're not seeing that. They're only going up because,
Going
like
up.
you said, Alex, the supply chains is dictating that. So, the whole incentive question, the federal government's incentive question, is going to be very confusing over the next couple of years. The Treasury Department has kicked the can down the road. I think and rightfully so. There's still a lot of things to work out as to what that looks like. There's so many questions. I mean, infrastructure, technology, battery technology, prices. Like I said, I think my bet is that Buick and Cadillac at some point will not be fully electric brands. I think these ICE vehicles still are incredibly profitable. The buying process right now is getting tiresome. People waiting too long for these EVs to get to market.
Well, and the price increases as they're waiting for them to come to market. I know Drew posted something over in the forums, and he just commented there. I think he had a Ford Lightning on order, and I think it's went up like $2,000 or $3,000. What, 2 or 3 times between the time he ordered it, and it still hasn't showed up.
Right. And then Kevin just published a video on the EV credits. A lot of that's changing, even I think in terms of where what countries the federal government will consider where the minerals come from, or where the minerals are processed. Already there's talk about relaxing some of the guidelines with minerals that come from China if they're processed here in the U.S. So the Treasury Department has a lot of wiggle room, I think, to write in these laws. I think it's going to be a moving target. I think as they get deeper into it, there's going to be adjustments made over the next, through 2032. I would guess. I think they're approaching it rationally. I think it's something we don't always say the government does. It's from the incentive perspective. Again, look, the whole infrastructure, the grid. But one of the big questions I think on the grid and the capital is the infrastructure is, when does the investment from the private market start happening with the grid? And there's talk now that as the automakers are pushing forward with these EV plans, the public-private markets are seeing much less risk in investing in these types of infrastructure plays, and that's what's going to drive that. So we'll see. But fascinating times in our space, for sure.
Yeah.
Who brought up the metaverse?
Oh, Kevin said that's the only thing we haven't talked about today.
The metaverse.
We'll pass.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know what to say about the metaverse.
If anyone's going to pioneer that in the car business, that'll be Kevin Fry.
Yeah, my money's on Kevin.
Well, Kevin will do the hard work and tell us what not to do over time. Over time. Sure.
Yeah. Same way
Yeah,
with
I mean, remember the whole
crypto, I believe.
subscription play? Remember the whole subscription play for a while?
Yeah. Subscription play. That was the big disruptor, 2 years ago? Boy, that one didn't
Maybe
last
3.
long.
Yeah, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
3, 4 years.
2 or 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, in theory and on paper, I didn't mind the idea. I sort of liked it, and I had one of my good friends actually participated in a program like that, and it had its pros and cons. I think ultimately he saw more pros than cons in it, but it didn't last long. Less than a year, I believe, 9-10 months before they shut it down.
Hard to pencil.
Yeah, that was
yeah.
it only appealed to a niche of customers.
And and even Cox, their data was showing early on. One of the big selling points publicly is the fact that you could change vehicles out but after 3 months, the people participating got bored with that and settled in on a vehicle. So it's the I think the convenience was and the price just was, and for dealers there was no, it just didn't pencil for customers either long term. So that's why we're watching this whole autonomy play with Scott Painter and crew, and you got to read the headlines. I mean, they did the partnership with AutoNation. There was a lot of stories about that. And look, that whole deal was autonomy is buying cars from AutoNation. I'm not sure what kind of partnership that is. I can tell you they're probably paying full price for whatever vehicles, if they're even available, EVs. I mean, how you were talking, Drew was talking about canceling his Lightning order. I mean, how many of these EVs are even in the marketplace right now? So
yeah,
again, Scott may be a few years too early again. It's hard to judge these things, time these things, but
it sure is. It only seems like, at least with our industry, something hot comes out, and it actually takes quite a few years before it really catches on.
If it catches on,
right? If it catches on, you're right.
Well, Cliff, do you see
Cliff is
23 just in a nutshell, real quick? You see 23 being bright?
I see it being uneven. First quarter could be rough. Second quarter, it's there are too many things we don't know. Recession, what the recession looks like. In Brock, EVs are around the 1800s. I think the first, just to jump on what he said, the first motorized pedestrian casualty in the U.S., I think it was in 1899, with a man named last name of Bliss, stepped off of a trolley car in New York City and got hit by an EV taxi. So there you go. There you go, Brock.
We're to the next trivia night now.
Yeah, so I don't know, Alex. 2023 is going to be uneven, and it's going to be different depending on which brand you're with. It could be month to month. It's not going to be as good as 2022 at all. I think there's going to be a lot of more coming back down to earth numbers. So there's going to be some pain. Maybe second half gets, people's expectations and start coming into better, better alignment with what's going on economically. But careful there, Christine. I think, so I don't know. Could we see some big deals get done? Like I said, we're going to start January off with a fairly sizable acquisition, I think. But I do think it's going to be probably into the second half of the year before we potentially see any other possible large deals.
We'll keep our eyes open on this one, since you're not going to share with us what this potentially could be.
Yeah, when it happens, will you at least say that's what I was talking about?
Yeah. I don't want to tank. Okay. I don't want to tank any possible activity going on because it's good. There's some good ones. I see 2023 being uneven. So
okay. Fair enough.
So Drew and Kevin and Carvana, that's the one.
Oh, you guys might be able to.
They let it out.
At the price it is right now. I mean, man. And does Carvana go bankrupt? I mean, it probably goes bankrupt if it doesn't get acquired.
So
it's something
for sure.
So basically, put the whole thing into a too long didn't read. So 2023, the roller coaster ride continues, and there's only 2 questions we need to have answered. Everything else is noise. What's going on with EV? What's going on with connected vehicles?
Right. Yep. And those 2 questions are going to be an ongoing question for the next 5+ years.
All right.
Sweet.
Well, you heard it here, folks.
Cliff, it's always a pleasure, man.
It's always fun. Wow. Year goes by too quick.
It sure does. No doubt.
Yep. So we'll get you an invite for next year now.
Okay. Yeah. Just put it on the calendar.
Perfect. So, all right, guys.
I was going to ask you, Jeff. You're a Mercedes dealer. Were you guys part of that whole negotiation with Mercedes on the over-the-air update revenue?
I heard some talkings about it. I didn't attend that that meeting, but I'm not sure exactly where they're going to go with it. But I know there were discussions around it. Yeah.
All right.
So I'll see if I can get some more information. If I can, I'll get it out to you.
Yeah. Cool.
Well,
all right, gentlemen.
Time,
make it a great Happy New Year's. We'll see everybody next year.
Great. It's fun. Right. You guys take care.
All right. Later on.